Americans for Prosperity North Dakota proudly supported important policy improvements that broke barriers for all North Dakotans this legislative session. From tackling unnecessary and burdensome occupational licensing standards to fighting for tax relief, AFP is proud to have played a part in improving the lives of North Dakotans this year. Join AFP today by visiting www.afpnd.org. This advertisement was paid for by Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. I am your host, Rob Port. Later in the show, going to have Interim University of North Dakota President Dr. Joshua Wynne on the program to talk about, well, his gig as interim president. It was actually a very good interview. I found, frankly, a lot of his comments about, emphasizing that the University of North Dakota and everybody who works there are public servants. They're here to serve the public. And by the public, I mean serve the students. I thought that was very refreshing. I thought he had a lot of good things to say. He explained why he didn't necessarily want to be president long term. So a very good interview. Stay tuned for that. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about grocery stores in rural North Dakota. Now, this has been a nagging problem in our state for a long time, and something that a lot of different people have tried different ways to fix, up to and including at one point we had, the government, the federal government, I think through the Federal Rural Development Office, was literally buying local grocery stores and operating them. The idea being that if a store doesn't have if a small town doesn't have a grocery store, it's going to die, right? I mean, if you don't have that core thing, that store where you can go and you can just get the necessities of life, food and water and those sorts of supplies, that the community is going to die. And so as more of these small town grocery stores die, more of the small towns are going to die, and that's going to continue to be the death of rural North Dakota. And then, consequently, it's going to be hard to attract people to live there, and on and on and on. It's legitimately a problem. I don't want to see small town North Dakota die either. I love small town North Dakota. I think North Dakota is a wonderful place to live. And it's not just, our big communities, our larger communities that are nice to live. The small towns are nice too. But how do we help them continue to thrive? How do we help them survive? We need to be talking about this. And we are going to be talking about this. There's an interim study. It's SCR 4013. It was introduced by State Senator Jim Dotzenrod. He's a Democrat from Wynne, as well as Senator Jerry Klein. He's a Republican from Fessenden. And also, by the way, a retired grocery store owner and past chairman of the state's Grocer Association. The resolution says, I quote, that North Dakota has lost 15% of its grocery stores in towns with populations of fewer than 2,100 people since 2013, and that small profit margins in the grocery store business make it difficult for store owners to keep up with building and infrastructure needs. I don't think that this is. I don't doubt that those things are true. The resolution also alleges that a considerable number of the state's population drive more than 10 miles to reach a grocery store that offers fresh milk, bread, meat, fruits, and vegetables, and that there is a, quote, strong negative correlation between the distance people drive for food and those people's health. Now, I don't know, 10 miles seems like a kind of an arbitrary threshold to choose. If you drive 9 miles, is that better? I mean, are you healthier because you're 9 miles from a grocery store instead of 11 miles? I don't know. I suspect that threshold was selected to maybe inflate the problem a little bit. But again, to me, it's not so much in access to food. I don't know it's really about health. I think really it's just about protecting these communities. And so how do we get there? I don't necessarily want to, subsidize grocery stores. I don't like, the government buying grocery stores or operating grocery stores. I don't want to do that. But if we don't do that, I mean, that's kind of the only tool that the government has. I mean, I guess we could look at regulations that apply to grocery stores. I guess we could look at taxes that apply to them. Maybe there's some things we could tweak there to make life a little bit easier for these small town businesses. I don't know. Maybe there is. Willing to listen. But if we're not going to outright subsidize them, what do we do? The problem is what we're fighting are choices that individual North Dakotans are making. The reason why small-town grocery stores are dying is because small-town North Dakotans aren't shopping there, or they're not choosing to live in those communities in the first place. We have seen a migration, of North Dakotans, even those who continue to farm, even those who continue to work in agriculture, don't live on the farm anymore. Right? They'll live in the larger cities and they'll commute out to the farm. Or if they do live on the farm or live in one of these rural communities, they do a lot of their shopping in the larger communities, in the larger grocery stores, the larger department stores where, they could probably get a better selection and better prices than they get at their rural at those stores' rural counterparts. And how can you blame them? I mean, if you're a family living in rural North Dakota and you can save money by buying, your groceries in Minot or Jamestown or Fargo or Grand Forks or Williston or Dickinson, someplace like that, during your trip into town, as opposed to shopping at the local store, it's hard to blame people for being thrifty, right? It's hard to blame people for making choices that allow them to save money. I mean, those are those kitchen table issues that we're talking about all the time that are important. I mean, they sort of transcend politics. I mean, you can have all the ideology, you can have all the partisanship in the world that you want, but at the end of the day, if you could save your family $100 a month by changing where you shop, why wouldn't you do that? That's what those small-town grocery stores are up against. It's more expensive to get the product out to them. They can't necessarily deploy the economies of scale that their larger competitors can. It's just a tough business. They have geography going for them, and that's good. But the rest of it, they're working at a disadvantage, and that's hard. And all the more so as transportation is getting easier, right? I mean, the trip into town is getting less expensive. I realize gas prices are what they are, and they go up and down. But, I mean, let's face it, vehicles have gotten more fuel efficient. They've gotten easier to travel. The roads have gotten better. And I'm talking, kind of a larger timeline here. Go back 30, 40, 50, 60 years. A lot of these things have gotten better. Gotten easier. And that's what these small town grocery stores are up against. And the problem is what they're really up against is progress. Things are changing, and it's harder for these smaller stores to survive. And really what I think they need is not so much government assistance or government bailout. And again, I'm open to talking about things that we could do in terms of deregulation or the tax code or whatever. I'm open to looking at some of those things to see if we can help. But by and large, I don't want the government stepping in and running grocery stores. I don't want the government trying to prop up a business model that the marketplace and the customer bases in these communities are turning their backs on. I mean, why should the taxpayers pay to prop up businesses that the taxpayers themselves are choosing not to shop at, or at least not to shop at enough to make them profitable and to allow them to stay open? Rather, I think we maybe need to look at the business model. Maybe there's different ways of doing things. I mean, maybe you could turn some of these grocery stores into clubs, right? Where you buy a membership in your small town grocery store, and with that you get a certain allotment of groceries every month, or you're committing to buy a certain dollar amount of groceries every month. Or maybe the store, instead of just stocking everything, maybe they stock fewer things on hand and make it more of an order business, right? Where you order your groceries online and then it gets delivered in your small town, and instead of having to drive all the way into one of the larger communities, you could just pick it up locally. I don't know if that could work. I don't work in the grocery store business. I used to manage a retail store, but it wasn't a grocery store. I don't know. But these are just ideas off the top of my head. I think the fight over these small town grocery stores is emblematic of something that, a mistake that we make a lot, which is that an old way of doing things is the only way to do it. And if a way of doing things, a certain type of business or whatever goes out, that's something to save, that we have to protect these things from going out. And I'm not so sure that that's true. And now again, I realize if you're living in a small community, you don't want to see your grocery store go away. I mean, I imagine it's convenient. I know as somebody who lives, a couple blocks away from a grocery store, it's convenient. If you run out of ketchup, more ketchup is not that far away. And I live, a couple blocks away from a grocery store that's open 24 hours a day. That's hugely convenient for me. If I lived in a different sort of community, I wouldn't have that convenience of having a grocery store just down the street. Losing that, that would be tough. But the people who live in those communities have to choose to make the decisions to patronize those businesses. And those businesses have to adapt to reality, the realities of the marketplace. Operating the sort of small-town grocery store that we've seen in years past just might not be a practical thing going forward. We may need something more along the lines. I mean, we have all sorts of food delivery options, right? We have, and I'm not just talking about like ordering a pizza or ordering like DoorDash or something to your door and getting food from Applebee's delivered. I'm talking about, like the meal delivery, like Home Chef or Blue Apron, where they actually, deliver you groceries for specific meals to your home. There's lots of things that we could do. And the infrastructure is in place to do them. And what I worry about is if we get the government rolling towards, I don't know, some sort of a bailout or some sort of an effort to prop up these grocery stores, they're not going to seek out those changes, right? They said they're going to wait around for the government to come in and save them. They're going to wait around for, the community, their customers to just come back to them out of some sense of loyalty or civic pride. And I just don't necessarily think that's going to happen because, again, it's hard to blame people for making individual choices that are best for their bottom line. It's a tough sell. So I think these businesses need to change. And I think they need to be given the impetus to change by not getting promises from the government that we're going to prop them up or we're going to bail them out. I know it sounds cruel. I know it sounds harsh. But sometimes what's best for our economy, what's best for the future is to let these businesses sink or swim on their own. My interview with President Wynne coming up next. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. With me now is Interim University of North Dakota President Dr. Joshua Wynne. Josh, how are you?
I'm good, Rob. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. You are taking over the school. You're taking over as president. As a matter of fact, I was talking to your public information officer who was telling me that he's getting used to calling you President Wynne now. So how does it feel? What made you want to take on this job?
Well, it feels very good, Rob. I'm going to continue in my current role as Vice President for Health Affairs and Dean of the UND School of Medicine and Health Sciences, in addition to taking on this additional responsibility as interim president for the entire university. It feels very good. I'm excited about it. The reason I decided to accept the nomination was really twofold. One was I heard from a lot of people inside and outside the university that encouraged me to do it. And number two is I'm excited about the opportunity to continue the positive momentum of the university and to try to really execute even more our strategic plan, the One UND strategic plan. That excites me. I like a focused approach to the future, and I would like to do whatever I can to continue the forward momentum of the university.
News today is that you're not taking any sort of pay for your job as interim president. You're obviously going to continue your existing salary as dean of the medical school and your present positions, but you're not taking any additional pay. Why'd you make that decision?
I think for a number of reasons. One, I think I'm fairly compensated at present. Two, this is an interim position. And three, I quite frankly wanted to remove any thought that I was doing this for any other reason other than trying to be a good citizen and to do what's best for the university and best for the people of North Dakota. And a symbol of that is just saying, I'm fine the way I am. I'm not doing it for ego. I'm not doing it for a title. I'm not doing it for money. I'm just trying to do the right thing by the university based on the encouragement that I got from a large number of people inside and outside of the university.
There was some turbulence at the end of your predecessor's term in office. A lot of it having to do with, I think a lot of people looking at, there were some other controversies, but I think a lot of it focused on the perception, be it fair or unfair, that he was looking for a job almost from the time he stepped in the door. We had, obviously, that he applied for a job in Florida. He applied for the job in Denver. In the grand scheme of things, he really wasn't at the University of North Dakota all that long before it seemed like he started looking for another job. Do you feel like that's something that you have to address now to renew, like maybe calm the waters at UND and say, listen, we're going to have a steady hand on the tiller at this point?
Well, I hope that I have a steady hand. I hope I've demonstrated that over the last decade that I've been dean of the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. And I think it's important to separate the message from the messenger, if you will. The message about the University of North Dakota is that, in fact, I think a good number of the things that Mark Kennedy instituted or oversaw were actually good initiatives, and it became tainted, to paraphrase what you said, by some of the, if you will, personality issues. But what I hope to emphasize are the good policy decisions that were made and to try to execute them, to carry them forward, to do the right thing, because I think we are making progress in the right direction. I agree that there is a perception both inside and outside of the university that some of the, if you will, personality issues may have obscured the good things that are going on. I think with my track record in North Dakota and at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences over the last 10 years will help point the way forward. You know, I like the expression that it's okay to look in the rearview mirror to see what's behind you, but it's important not to stare. And I would rather look out of the windshield of the UND car and look and see what we're going towards than what is behind us. And I think what we're going towards is an even better university, even more focused on trying to meet the needs of the people of North Dakota, and as I'm sure you would endorse, trying to do it in as conscientious and cost-effective manner as possible.
What are some of the challenges that the university faces? And I always have to, as somebody who writes a lot about the university, I have to chuckle a little bit because when I hear university people talk about their institutions, particularly in administration, it always seems like the range of how things are going are from wonderful to super wonderful. And obviously, I think things tend to get a little flowery sometimes, but speak frankly with me. What are some of the challenges that you think UND is going to face over the next year? Because your contract automatically expires in June of next year. So you've got basically a year on the job. What do you think the challenges facing you during that year are going to be?
Well, I think you touched on one of them already in your question, Rob, which is a sense, and I think it's both inside and the outside of the university, that maybe there's some confusion of where we're headed, and there was confusion between, as I said, the message and the messenger. So I think it's going to be really important to see if I, with the help of my colleagues, can really get people focused on mission and not just on personality. Number two, and you've addressed this in some of your columns, there is the reality that the graduating classes of seniors coming out of high school is going down in size. I mean, that's just the demographics of our state and our country, and it's a reality. And as you properly point out, we need to be cognizant of that and react to it appropriately. Now, as an interim who will be there, as you say, probably for at longest a year, what I want to do is to not fully solve that problem, if you will, but at least bring it into the conversation so that we think about it. I mean, if we need to do right sizing, we should start that conversation. And I think the challenge of declining enrollment across the country, let alone across the United States, is a reality, and we shouldn't put our heads in the sand, but we need to think about it constructively. I think there's an expression that I've been using a little bit that I think is apropos here, and that is UND needs to move forward and strive for excellence. So with whatever number of students we have, we need to try to give them the very best education we can and to help prepare them optimally for what follows. I think we're doing better at that, but we really need to try to do better still. So I like the part of, yes, we need to move forward, but we also need to strive for excellence. And striving for excellence means getting better as educators, getting better as researchers, getting better as public servants, and doing it mindful of the substantial investment that the people of North Dakota have made in UND. So really making sure everyone understands that we work for the people of North Dakota rather than the other way around is really important. And I think you've pointed out properly, in my opinion, that sometimes people in academia get a little too inward focused rather than looking out for the needs of the state and the people of the state. I've tried to do that with my leadership team at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences to focus on the challenges of healthcare delivery in the state. And that's why we came up with the Healthcare Workforce Initiative to try to address real needs in the state. I would hope that I will play some role in the university for people, a year from now saying how UND is even more focused on the needs of the state and contributing to the state rather than just saying, how can the state support us? So I think it's a challenge to change the mindset to some degree that we are a service organization and the people we serve are the people of North Dakota rather than the other way around.
Stay on that. Give me some specifics over the next year for what you feel like you can do during your time in office to achieve all those things you just talked about.
Well, and again, I don't want to be pie in the sky. In a year, there's only so much you can do.
Sure, yeah.
But I hope what I hope my influence will be to not only to not have boxes checked of everything we've accomplished, but rather to try to evolve the culture and the way of doing things so we are really outward looking, if you will, rather than innerly focused. I think universities, as many organizations, tend to think just in terms of internal operations rather than what do we really need to do for the state? What do we really need to do for the people?
Yeah.
And so what I hope to help influence is to really get that focus that we are public servants and we answer to the people and we need to do what the people tell us that we need to do. That's what we did at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. We talked less and listened more. So I'm going to spend the next month or two really trying to listen both on campus, but also importantly out in the communities of North Dakota as to what people feel we need to do, so that that's both important on the substance of what they tell us, but also the culture that we are public servants and we answer to the people. Trying to inculcate that as part of the culture of the University of North Dakota, I think will be important. And if you're interviewing me a year from now, and we both can look back at a year where there was some movement in the perception of the importance of the university really focusing on what the community needs, I will consider that a very successful interim presidency.
Well, we'll have to schedule that interview for a year from now. Now, you've been talking, and I agree. I agree with everything that you've been saying so far about the importance of the university serving the state, because I feel like that's serving the and by serving the state, I mean serving the students. I think you serve the state by serving the students. I think those things are just inextricable from one another. But let me ask you about internal operations, because you can't serve the students if you don't have a solid campus atmosphere. Do you think there's a morale problem at the University of North Dakota?
I'd like to do a little more listening rather than talking, because I've been so focused on what's going on in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences that I'm not as involved, or I haven't been as involved in discussions throughout the rest of the campus. But I think I have heard that from people, and I think there are some groups that are probably not completely satisfied. So I think that is an issue. But I think what I'm going to do in addition to listen is also to emphasize that whatever has happened in the past is the past, and we need to move forward. Now, that doesn't mean we ignore the past, but I think there is a tendency that we all do to sort of, again, stare in that rearview mirror and just think about the past. And while I don't want to discount that, I think that by showing that we're really looking forward and that we're trying to legitimately address concerns that people have had will lead to a change in campus culture and a more forward-looking focus rather than a somewhat backward-looking focus that I think is present in certain quarters.
Why didn't you want this job long-term? I mean, obviously you're taking the interim job. Everything that I've read leads me to you don't want this job full-time, long-term. Why not?
So the most important reason is I am so vested in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences and our various projects that I really would like to see that to even more fruition. I think we've made great progress where we are certainly doing better in delivering health care in rural communities. We still have a ways to go, but we have a plan that is partially implemented, and I really am very excited to try to see that through. I've been honored to be part of it for a decade. We're making progress, but we certainly have more to do, and that's sort of my first love, and I want to get back to that full time once this gig is over.
Do you feel like at the University of North Dakota that one of the critiques I've been hearing of UND in recent years is that enrollment rates have been dropping a little bit, but also one of the things that I heard and certainly heard President Kennedy talk about this on his way out was former President Kennedy was that graduation rates are going up. Now I realize maybe this is sort of more of a long-term leadership type question. And again, I realize you only have, you're only taking this on an interim basis, but I hear those two things and I'm not necessarily displeased. I feel like one may be related to the other. I feel like maybe if we get a little bit pickier about who's coming in, and I realize we're talking about a public university. This is a taxpayer-funded public university. And I think with that comes a duty to be pretty open-handed with who we allow in and who gets to attend the University of North Dakota. That being said, I have been very critical of universities for taking this approach to where enrollment is the key metric. How can we get enrollment higher? Let's push enrollment higher. And there's not been as much focus on outcomes for the students. What's happening to these kids as these adults, these young men, young women, and even non-traditional students, maybe in different age brackets. What's happening to them as they leave the campus? Are they finding their degrees useful? Are they completing their degrees? I don't think we ask those questions enough. Do you see the same thing? I'm not necessarily bothered by the enrollment trend at UND going down if some of the outcomes get better for students on the other end. I mean, A, do you see the same connection between the two things that I do? And B, how do you feel about them?
Yeah, so let me just say that I think you're actually spot on, that declining enrollment is obviously a concern for the university to try to balance its books, quite frankly. I mean, we get tuition revenue and so forth. But I don't think, in agreement with you, I don't think that should be the controlling factor. The controlling factor should be, referencing back my prior statement, striving for excellence. What we should really be trying to do is to say that the students that we are educating are graduating with the tools they need to be successful in the future. So I think that focusing on making the student experience better, both from a standpoint of just their overall experience, but especially their academic experience, is the essential element. if it just focusing on the numbers is wrong. You're absolutely on the mark. And I think it's also true what you say about enrolling a diverse student body. I mean, students who come from rural areas may not have had the same academic preparation as someone who went to high school in Fargo. I don't think that we should simply focus on graduation rates if it means that we're not going to admit the broad category of students who are present in North Dakota. So we need to do both. We need to work to make sure that they get the additional support they need so that they'll graduate. But I am not in favor of focusing simply on retention and graduation rates if that means that we're not going to be a true public institution,
sure, yeah.
Meaning that we just take the cream of the crop. That's not our role. So I think you're spot on. I agree with you. The challenge is, how do we do both? And I think the answer is we do the best we can with the resources we have, but with the focus is not on balancing the budget. The focus is on the excellence of the academic experience and the preparation we give to all of our students. And it may mean that certain students need additional services so that they can compete and graduate. And I'm fine with that. We do that formally at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences with our Indians into Medicine program. Now, we have some federal funding that helps with this, but for American Indian students who typically come in less well prepared than some of our traditional students, we have additional support for them so that they can then do well, but they have to pass the same tests as everyone else. When they graduate, they're just as qualified as any other student. That's what I would like to see us do, is to make sure that we just don't focus on graduation rates or retention rates, but we make sure that we are a true public institution that tries to help all students who come to us and not just the elite.
Thank you so much for the time. I have just one last question. You mentioned earlier that you wanted during your time to really focus on instilling, and you can correct me if I took this the wrong way, but instilling a focus on the idea that the folks who work at the university, the faculty, the administrators, everybody there are public servants and are there to serve the state. Do you feel, first of all, tell me a little bit more about what that means to you as a practical matter, and is focusing on student outcomes a part of that?
So I think student outcomes is a part of it, because if I'm a father and I have a child going to the University of North Dakota, I want to feel comfortable that my son or daughter is getting the optimal educational experience they can there, and that will help prepare them for a future that is changing very rapidly. So I do think that that's important. And I think, to answer the first part of your question, I think that I have this expression that I'd like to apply here, and that is, an institution is not what it says, but what it does. And I think that I like to try to role model that I'm a public servant. I hope that as president, I'll be a servant leader. And it starts with me setting a good example, and I hope that my history over the last 10 years of focusing on what North Dakota needs rather than what the school needs will stand me in good stead over the next year. And I remind people of that importance, and I think it's become part of our culture at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences of being outward-looking, if you will, rather than inward-looking, of not telling, for example, the legislature what we at the school need, but rather asking the legislature, what does the state of North Dakota need, and then trying to act to effectuate what we're being told as far as what the needs are. So I will hope to continue to model that type of behavior and expect it from my senior leadership team. And I think they do that, but I'm going to make that expectation overt and not just implied.
I promised you that was the last question, and now I'm going to break my promise and ask you one more question. And you may not want to answer.
Sure, go ahead, Rob.
You may not want to answer this either, because maybe it's not your place to, or whatever. But any thoughts on the sort of candidate that the University of North Dakota should be looking for, State Board of Higher Education should be looking for, to be the full-time, to be your replacement, the full-time president? I say full-time, but the next president, the next actual president, not just interim president of the University of North Dakota. In answering that question also, as somebody who's going to go back to his job and continue to be dean of the medical school at the University of North Dakota under this new president, what should we be looking for?
Well, so I think that one thing is someone. Let me start again. There has been some talk that we really want someone with North Dakota roots. And I don't disagree with that, but I don't want to limit that too much. The way I would paraphrase someone with North Dakota roots is someone who is aware of and will continue to learn about the needs of the people of the state and who will be responsive to those needs. I mean, look, I came here from out of state 15 years ago, and I did not have a lot of experience in a rural state. And I learned, and my wife and I came to love this place. And so, a focus on North Dakota and its culture can be learned. You don't have to be born here, in my opinion, to do that, but you have to be responsive and sensitive to the dynamics of the state. And I think that someone who isn't like that is going to be an outsider, whether they were born here or not. So that, I think, is number one. Number two is someone who really has had experience with higher education. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that means we have to do things the way we've done them in the past, but someone who really understands education, so he or she can be the leader of really doing all the things we talked about. And I think number three is someone where at least we have the expectation that he or she is going to be in the position for a while. I think the experience that you mentioned with Mark and other universities has not been positive, and I think we, the people of North Dakota, should be able to expect that the next full-time president comes here with the full expectation of being here for long enough to really move the needle. And I would suggest that's 5 years going forward. And again, life happens and things change. But I would hope that we have someone who has a real commitment, a deep commitment to North Dakota, knowledge of higher education, and a commitment to stay the course over at least a reasonable length of time. I think those three characteristics would be really important and would help shape us for the future and not just focus on the past.
Dr. Wynne, thanks for your time.
Rob, good to talk with you. Look forward to doing it again.
That is it for today's Plain Talk podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening. New episodes come out most weekday mornings, right away in the morning. If you want to download them on your device, the podcast is available pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast. If you find a platform out there where Plain Talk with Rob Port is not available, please email me, rob@sayanythingblog.com, and let me know, and I'll make sure that we get added to that platform as well. Also, use that email account, again, rob@sayanythingblog.com, if you have any feedback on the show, if you have any problems listening to the podcast at all, if you want to send in questions for my regular guests, Senator Kevin Cramer, Congressman Kelly Armstrong, I would sure appreciate it. Also, if you're listening to the podcast on a rating that allows you to rate or review the the podcast, I would sure appreciate it if you do that. Each new rating, each new review helps other people find the podcast. It's a big, big deal, so I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that's done it, and all the kind words and all the positive ratings. The ratings and reviews for the podcast so far have been overwhelmingly positive, so I really appreciate that. Follow me on social media. I'm Rob Port on Facebook and Twitter. Say Anything Blog has accounts on Facebook and Twitter. Very easy to find. If you follow me there, say hi, because I like it when people say hi. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again.